I'll give you a little bit of my background story because that's what I know a lot about. I was originally a high school English and history teacher. I did that for 9 years in New South Wales, and my last posting was to Bourke. During my time as a teacher, I learned to fly because I'd always had a passion for aircraft. I'd built model aeroplanes and flown them, and it was just something that was in my spirit that I was an aviator in that sense. And I was a widow's son, so there wasn't any money for learning to fly early on. It wasn't until I'd been a teacher for a few years that providentially a fellow came to the town that I was living in, which is Barraba, on the northern tablelands of New South Wales and New England area, and the opportunity came to go down to the airport and actually learn to fly there. And that proved to be fulfilment of a life's ambition, of course. And when I went to Bourke, there were a lot of light aircraft out there belonging to graziers and people like that, and I was able to fly those aircraft around for free because they wanted to be flown, or there were jobs that needed doing, and I was able to get up quite a few hours. And while I was in Bourke, there was a combined Brethren and Baptist church, very mission-minded like yourselves, and the occasion arose when a missionary came from Irian, and she spoke about her work. And she said, I couldn't do what I do if it wasn't for MAF that comes in with the freezer bread and mail every week, enables me to move over to other airstrips to do my ministry as a nurse. And I thought, a light went on in my head. I'm thinking, I love flying and I can't get enough of it, but I also really see here an opportunity to serve, to be useful to that thing which is a passion of mine, can be helpful to others, especially in the mission field. And so I applied to MAF, who at that time were based down in Melbourne, and they said, oh, amber lights here. You're 31. We prefer them young. I'm thinking, that's young. Now, I wish I was 31. And then they said, you're flying in the bush. You've got all these bad habits. We're going to have to... If you came to us, it would be a major work to get you disciplined about your flying. That's what it amounts to. It's not just a matter of jumping in an aeroplane and cranking it and go flying. It is a discipline. And so I'm thinking, okay, I'm willing. And then they said, we prefer our candidates to have been to Bible college. And you haven't been to Bible college, and you'd be too old by the time you did a year's Bible college, so that's another strike, 3 strikes. However, you have been doing things like I've been on beach mission. I've been a follower since 1968 of Jesus. I went forward in Newcastle at the Billy Graham Crusade that happened back then. We're on a landline, so that's when I committed my life to Jesus and said, here I am, send me, and not realising he was going to send me so far. So we sold up all we had. I had 2 children at that stage, 2 daughters, put them in the back seat of the Falcon, hooked a trailer up, and what we had already sold we towed down to Ballarat, which is where they have the training base back in those days. And the assumption was that I would pay for my commercial licence, which was the minimum requirement, and if I qualified, and my wife came up to scratch as a mission wife, and you are continually being assessed as to whether you are a GMT, good mission material, and so we managed to get the commercial done, and I passed that. And then they said, we will accept you as a candidate. And so we were in Ballarat. I did my training to be able to fly in the environment in Papua New Guinea. And so for those of you who have a hankering to go and fly in Papua New Guinea, it is demanding. And that's what Tony Holloway, who was my instructor, inculcated in me. I would go down to the airport in the morning. Back in those days, there was the old RAAF base, and they had the dongas there, the houses that the wind blew between the weatherboards, and it was miserable. Don't go to Ballarat. This was in January. We came from Burke, and we're putting on winter woolies. By the time I had graduated in April, you couldn't pick up a spanner without it feeling like it had been in the fire. It was so cold it burned your hand. So I'm starting to wander too far from the fact here, but when Tony would say to me in the morning, "Are we flying today?" and the clouds are just above the windsock, I'd say no. He'd say, "Well, we're going to go and have a look." And so that was the inculcation of the preparation you get for Papua New Guinea. It's always cloudy, as the Papua New Guinea ladies here know. It rains every afternoon, and if you're going to do any amount of flying, you'll be prepared to fly in the rain. And it requires a discipline. You're not to fly under the clouds because a lot of clouds have got rocks in them. And so you are to be brave enough to go out there and fly in the rain and be sensible enough to know when to turn around. So for young fellows who want to be a pilot there, highly recommended, but be aware that not all of the young MAFers came back, because sometimes it just didn't work out right. And so some fellas hit the rocks, and that's tragic. These days, moving to the present, which is relevant to us, the aircraft are more technically inclined. I'll talk a bit more about that a little bit later. But they're typically two crew, and that does change the whole equation in balancing safety against the need to get there. At this point, I'll give your ears a rest. There's a lovely video which the chaps are going to project up for us. This is a significant year for us. All of you know when you have your 0 birthdays, it's a big year. For MAF, it's a zero birthday. It's our 80th anniversary. In May of this year, MAF was consecrated as a mission organisation, and they've flown faithfully right up to the present and into the future. The little motif that goes throughout this video from Philippians is a beautiful challenge, and it's very lovely the way it's tied together. Thank you, gentlemen. I believe this church has a partnership with MAF, and that's a wonderful thing. And as it says in the verse there, that I pray with joy for the and thankful for the partnership that churches around Australia have. MAF now, of course, is an international organisation. Traditionally, Australia has provided pilots and engineers for Papua New Guinea, and we've over the years also served in Borneo, Cambodia, Bangladesh, and currently in East Timor. MAF also draws from other countries, and MAF in America serves South America, and MAF in Europe serves Africa. But we have been leaders in the ministry of MAF in the world. Max Myers, who was one of the field leaders in Papua New Guinea, went on to be the whatever the head person was, chairperson or whatever, manager of MAF in America. So we still have that strong link. MAF in Cairns is the world headquarters for the administration of MAF. So we are quite significant in that way. So from the early days in Ballarat, where I did my training, we had a hangar there, and aircraft from Papua New Guinea and Arnhem Land would fly down there for their maintenance, which was rather inefficient and expensive. So now the base has been moved to Mareeba in North Queensland, far more appropriate. The weather, of course, is quite reasonable year-round, unlike Ballarat, and it's much easier for the aircraft to fly in from the fields where they are in the northern part. Just recently, I have 8 grandchildren, and in Brisbane I have 2 grandsons. And when we went to Papua New Guinea, we put all of our stuff in crates except what we were taking with us, and it was in storage on the assumption we'd be coming back to Australia after 3 years and so on. In fact, and I should add that, as I mentioned, that Margaret mentioned that in my first 10 months of MAF service, I flew in Arnhem Land, and that was simply because MAF, in their wisdom, don't let you go to Papua New Guinea unless you have 1,000 hours of flying experience. Otherwise, you're just going to go there and wreck an aeroplane and hurt yourself. So we, my wife and I, and 2 daughters went to Gulliwinku, which is the Aboriginal name for Elcho Island, which is basically halfway between Darwin and Gove. And so I was based there, and our son was conceived down in Ballarat. It's very cold down there. And so we then had him delivered in Nhulunbuy, and so he went to Papua New Guinea as a baby. I was quite enjoying my flying in the Northern Territory because the barramundi fishing is excellent, and so the weather isn't too bad most of the year. When the wet season comes in, it's just disastrous. But when it's dry season, there's a hazard in the dry season, of course, because that's when they burn everything, and so you can't send anything for smoke. But the flying was great, and the fishing was excellent. So when Max Myers said, you're coming back to Ballarat for retraining and onwards, I said, I think we like it here. And he said no. And so we went to Ballarat, and I had further training, and then we were posted to Mount Hagen for orientation, and then down to Wewak. Now, the point of my mentioning the crates is we left all that stuff behind in Ballarat, and we sent drums, 44-gallon drums as they were then, full of stuff that we knew we were going to need in there, but it didn't include my Meccano set. That was in the drums. And so just last week, I looked on the shelf in the garage and saw the old Meccano set sitting there and thought, this has got to go to the grandsons. There's no point in sitting there. And I had to explain to my son then that it skipped your generation, sorry boyo, because it was in Ballarat and you were in all over PNG, so it's going to go to your sons. Now, what's the point of this? Deviation. There's always a good reason. It just takes me a while to get to it. Just ask Lindsay, my story about chooks. So, I just was so frustrated that my grandson couldn't get a nut on bolt satisfactorily. He kept cross-threading it and fiddling around with it. And then I said, we've got to get this to go a bit longer, so we're going to extend this with this. And he's just beaten by the whole thing. He says, but I'm pretty good on Nintendo. I thought, oh, just shoot me now. Oh my goodness. We have a generation of young people coming back who haven't played with things like Build-A-Bricks or Meccano sets and so on, and they're great on computers. And that's what I think is feeding into the crisis we have in the world of a shortage of technically trained people. And for us in MAF, it's a crisis of LAMEs, licensed aircraft maintenance engineers. So if you know anyone who's a LAME, who's a Christian, tell him to get real and get out on the mission field, because there's aeroplanes there that need maintenance. As pilots, we were trained to do what we call 50 hours, which is basically a check of the aircraft and an oil change. But every 100 hours of flying, the aeroplane has to go into the hangar and be thoroughly checked by experts. I see people finger pointing over there, and that's good. But make his life miserable till he goes. Okay, so the fact is, we can't function as a technical ministry without technicians, and everyone wants to be a pilot. That's the fun part. And we had fellows recruited into MAF who were dual qualified. They were LAMEs and they were pilots, and they were frustrated because they were needed in the hangar more than they were out in the field. And so we, lucky ones, got to go flying. And when our plane was due for maintenance, we would go with the plane into the hangar, and we would do the stuff that we knew how to do and help the engineers to get the plane out. So by that evening, weather permitting, I could go back to my base. So after Mount Hagen, my wife and I went down to Wewak. We had 2 years in Wewak, flying in West Sepik, and talking to the ladies earlier, from Morribee province, which is over to the east of where I was. I was out on the western part, but it was fabulous flying. You take off in the morning, go into the highlands, you'd have a load of freezer bread and mail, supplemented by boxes of fish, and perhaps a missionary returning, or somebody who'd been in to Wewak overnighting or whatever. And it was fulfilling. It was great. And for guidance, we had the mountain range out there when you could see it, and when you couldn't, we had our maps. And Ian Stacey, who was our mentor in those days with the flying, taught technical map folding. So you had the map folded in just the right way that you could see where you were, and looking down through the clouds, you could see the bend in the Sepik River to know that's the correct one, I'm on track. Compare that with the map until the next hole in the cloud comes up. Oh, you have to turn the map over, it's on the other side, and so on. So nowadays, they're spoiled rotten. They've got things called GPSs, and with those, they can fly above the cloud and pop out at the right place. We flew above the cloud and prayed for a hole, and you would orbit down through the hole and pray that that hole had actually got some air, clean air under the hole, because if you get down there, there's no clean air in the hole, you're going to have to orbit back up again. And then, of course, expect that hole might be some in the vicinity of the airport that you wanted, or the airstrip. So the challenge out there for everyone, as you are well aware, this coming October or September, Father's Day, is buy a jerry can of fuel for MAF. Which leads me to another short story, and I'll try to keep it short. We used to fly all our aircraft on avgas, which is a refined version of petrol, which was fine until you couldn't get it in PNG for love nor money, simply because it was only jet aircraft and turbine aircraft that were flying that were really needing it. All the aircraft that were piston powered just had to find their own, and so the small operators like MAF, we were at one stage shipping avgas in from New Zealand to get it to Lae, to get it on the truck to get it up to the Highlands so it could then be flown out to Telefomin and places like that. It's dreadfully expensive to get your fuel that way. So what MAF has done over the years is transition to turbine power, which is Jet A1, which smells like kerosene when it burns, and is available everywhere. And so it's much more sensible for us now to have a turbine fleet. While I was in MAF, they were just transitioning then to Twin Otters, which is a turbine-powered aeroplane. And for those who are not really up to speed with this, a turbine is a thing that spins furiously, like at 30,000 revs per minute, makes a screaming noise, but it sends a blast of hot air out the back, which pushes the aeroplane forwards. However, for short airstrips, that's not very helpful because you need a fairly long runway. And so what they do, they put a shaft, the shaft which is down the middle, they put a propeller on the front of it. Very clever. So now that highly spinning shaft drives through a gearbox into a propeller, and propellers provide thrust at lower speeds, and so you can take off. And so the Twin Otter is a wonderful airplane. Would land on the length of a tennis court and take off just after the net was down. And so you can imagine that MAF has had to do quite a lot of adjustment. It's cost them squillions to re-equip with all these aircraft. And so again, we are so dependent upon wealthy Americans who donate airplanes to MAF Australia, which is a wonderful thing, but we're always dependent upon the churches to keep sending their people to come and man the aeroplanes, to repair the airplanes, and to send money for fuel and for maintenance and all those other good things. So I hope that's given you some ideas. I'm pretty scatterbrained. I don't have notes, but I speak from the heart. I try to make it interesting for you. And all I can say now is that MAF continues to function in all those places I mentioned. Currently for Australia, East Timor, Arnhem Land and Papua New Guinea. We did have a ministry at Alice Springs for some years. We're flying Pitjantjatjara Air, and that was Aboriginal owned. We were providing the technical expertise. The situation in Northern Territory is trending that way, as I understand. Obviously there are politics involved, and you would all understand how that works in Australia. And so there's a certain degree of flux in the management of our operation in Northern Territory. In Papua New Guinea, again, as the Papua New Guinea ladies knows, the Papua New Guinea men are pretty wild up in Inga and in those places. They're generally lovely down in Lae, but my goodness, the number of times when it's been difficult to go and land places, and that's still the case. There's still unrest. Lapa Lama, which was mentioned in the video, I've flown into out of Mount Hagen at the Baptist Mission Station, and it's, again, lovely people there. They're Highlanders, and they're far enough from Wapanamunda to be much better behaved than their brethren up further. So the other thing that I should mention is that the need is there for wives who are willing to go. So young women who are thinking about marrying, if you can find yourself a pilot, that would be so much better than if you just find a bloke who wants to stay in Australia.